When you think of the California gold rush, you probably picture it, right? A lone, dusty prospector striking it rich by pulling this massive gold nugget straight out of a river. Well, it's a great myth, but that's exactly what it is, a myth. The reality of how the West was won, and honestly how modern global commerce was shaped, has very little to do with lucky strikes in the dirt. Surprisingly, it has absolutely everything to do with the brilliant macroeconomic machinery that actually built the West behind the scenes. So welcome to this explainer where we're going to tear down the folklore and look at the actual architects of the frontier. To really wrap our heads around this, we first have to understand the sheer, mind-boggling scale of the chaos. 40,000. Just let that number sink in. In the year 1849 alone, 40,000 desperate fortune seekers flooded onto the remote peninsula of San Francisco. The population literally exploded overnight, creating this massive, terrifying logistical bottleneck. The city's infrastructure didn't just fail, it practically didn't exist in the first place. And because there was zero infrastructure, the environment they walked into was defined entirely by one thing: mud. We're talking unpaved streets turning into these open, raging torrents of clay and tidal silt that would literally swallow pack animals, wagons, and expensive cargo whole. It was a toxic, chaotic, and just utterly unforgiving landscape. Not exactly the glamorous adventure those recruitment posters promised, right? But within this incredible muddy mess, a few hyper-perceptive entrepreneurs saw something else entirely. Okay, let's dive into this, because this concept changes everything. While the vast majority of those 49ers were out there blindly digging in the dirt, these specific entrepreneurs understood the pick and shovel business model. They realized that the absolute best way to build sustainable wealth in a hyper-volatile market is not to take the risk yourself. No way. It's to manufacture the foundational infrastructure, the physical tools, and the transactional plumbing that allows everyone else to take those crazy risks. So here is our roadmap for the explainer. We're going to cover the infrastructure of chaos, engineering industrial armor, routing abstract wealth, the monopolization of trust, and finally, the pick and shovel continuum. Section 1. The infrastructure of chaos. To survive a market this wild, you couldn't just rely on normal business practices. The chaos demanded extreme, revolutionary solutions just to keep society functioning. You essentially needed an infrastructural plumbing loop. As you can see here, on one end, you have raw speculation, the physical wear and tear of the mining camps, and the raw gold dust itself. To turn that completely chaotic asset into something globally scalable, you need a plumbing system. Levi Strauss provided the industrial denim to solve the physical wear, while Wells Fargo built the financial routing to stabilize all that wild wealth. Together, they converted raw speculation into stable commercial scalability. Section 2. Engineering industrial armor. Now, the physical extraction of this wealth took an immense, brutal toll on human bodies and materials. Placer mining was an absolute physical trial. Just imagine spending 12 to 14 hours a day kneeling in freezing mountain streams, scrambling over jagged quartz, and shoveling literally millions of tons of rough gravel. The traditional clothing of the era, cheap cotton and flimsy wool, was an absolute joke against this kind of industrial friction. Garments would just disintegrate within weeks. Miners were left totally exposed, facing these exorbitant replacement costs in a hyperinflationary economy. So, how on earth do you solve a problem like that? Well, enter Levi Strauss, an incredibly astute Bavarian immigrant who set up shop importing heavy canvas. Notice, he didn't pan for gold, he sold the supplies. But the real game changer happened when he teamed up with a Latvian tailor out in Nevada named Jacob Davis. Davis noticed that his miner clients kept tearing their pockets entirely off under the weight of heavy rock samples. So he executed this brilliant, honestly almost absurd structural pivot. He took solid copper rivets, hardware normally used for horse harnesses, and hammered them directly into the structural stress points of the pants. This created an incredible amount of asymmetric strain resistance. And this brilliantly illustrates the solution. This was a massive leap in human ingenuity. On May 20, 1873, they secured patent number 139121. They used this heavyweight French fabric, serge denims, which, as you probably guessed, we know today as denim, and dyed it deep indigo just to mask the heavy grease and dirt of industrial labor. What they manufactured wasn't fashion. It was literally a structural exoskeleton for human labor. By applying mechanical engineering to textiles, they commoditize physical work. It's exactly like how a modern hardware or user interface solution operates today. Section 3. Routing abstract wealth. But physical armor was only half the equation, right? We also have to look at the completely abstract dimension of finance.
handled by an equally legendary institution, Wells Fargo. Because in the 1850s, California was suffering from a massive structural vacuum. Mountains of physical wealth were being dug up, but the transactional mechanics were completely broken. Raw gold dust lacked standardized purity. It was functionally useless if you just walked into a store. Its value fluctuated wildly day by day, and it was incredibly dangerous to physically transport out of the mountains to the banking networks back on the East Coast.
To fix this massive headache, Wells Fargo essentially stepped in and built a 19th century API. Here is their transactional pipeline. Step 1, the technical assay. Highly trained agents weighed the dust with high-precision scales to standardize its exact value. Step 2, the financial metamorphosis. They took that heavy, risky gold, locked it in a massive safe, and issued a highly trusted, lightweight paper gold draft in its place. And Step 3, the transcontinental route. Using a fleet of stagecoaches and heavily armed messengers riding shotgun, Wells Fargo assumed the massive physical risk of actually routing that value across the entire continent.
Section 4. The monopolization of trust. Now, as we know, the ultimate validation of any institution only happens during a systemic market collapse. And in 1855, the initial gold rush bubble violently burst. The timeline here is just breathtaking. On February 22nd, a massive banking house called Page, Bacon & Company unexpectedly goes insolvent. The news hit San Francisco, and the psychological contagion is absolutely instantaneous. By February 23rd, you have a full-blown systemic bank run. Terrified citizens are flooding the streets. Almost every major financial institution runs out of gold, locks their doors, and just vanishes into thin air. The economy effectively halts. Wells Fargo closes its doors to audit its ledgers. But then, on Tuesday, February 26th, the tension breaks. Wells Fargo reopens, and they confidently stack bottomless mountains of gold coins directly on their counters, proving to the entire public that they have total, undeniable liquidity. They had successfully weaponized the ultimate currency of the frontier, institutional trust. By surviving this brutal Darwinian event while their competitors were just permanently erased from the map, Wells Fargo permanently tethered the wild wealth of the Pacific Coast directly to global capital markets. Overnight, they became an undisputed financial superpower.
Section 5, the pick and shovel continuum.
Let's move to how this builds into our modern world, because these 19th century institutions laid down the exact architectural blueprint for the tech ecosystem we live in today. Look at this comparison. In the 1850s, Levi's provided the physical hardware in the form of heavy denim, while Wells Fargo provided the routing via stagecoach bullion. Fast forward to the 2020s. NVIDIA doesn't build speculative AI consumer apps, right? No, they provide the specialized hardware, the GPUs that every AI company absolutely needs. Stripe doesn't run consumer banks. They provide the abstract cloud transaction API to route money. By eliminating direct asset risk and decoupling value from geography, these modern giants are literally running a 170-year-old source code. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this core metric: monopolize the tools that enable speculation. The most absolute, permanent wealth is not found by chasing the wild, speculative windfalls of the crowd. It is found by standing firmly in the mud and building magnificent, unkillable global institutions that just quietly keep the rest of the world running behind the scenes. Which leaves us with this final thought. When you look up at the sleek glass skyscrapers of San Francisco, or you see the pristine silicon clean rooms of Santa Clara, you really have to ask yourself, are today's technology empires truly innovating something new? Or are they simply running the exact same 1849 playbook built right there in the California mud? It's definitely something to think about the next time you put on a pair of jeans or tap your phone to pay. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.